G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day and a fantastic Wednesday. Now legends, of course, as always, we do have a lot to go over, but I need to compress this. I've got less than 30 minutes before I desperately need to leave, and I'll still be late to actually see my neurosurgeon. Of course, getting those results from the MRI I had on Monday. Now, I'm a little bit nervous for these results. I've had 3 and a bit rounds of chemotherapy since. I've done absolutely everything in my life that I can to make sure these results are better than they could be. I've had not a drop of alcohol. I've had no more than 10 grams of carbs a day. I've been in heavy ketosis, exercise, everything I can, but you never know how these tumours will go. War of attrition, it's not constant, it's not linear, it can be exponential with tumours like this. So a little bit nervous, but I'll share it with you guys as soon as I know. So today, we're going to look at the maps, geolocations, compare maps as usual, talk a little bit about where some distances are on the maps, but I also have the kilometre squares of Syriac map to show you as well. That gives us a good idea of momentum on the front line, and I'll be updating those numbers back through months as we have time to. There's been an attack on the Kirch Strait Bridge. We'll talk about that first, and then I want to talk about the real lethality of FAB glide bombs because they have increased in range, but what I want to do is show you the issue in trying to actually counter the Su-34s here using a little bit of maths and the actual engagement time that you have to hit those at the speeds that they do fly. So we'll get into all of that. There's some footage there too. Now, first off the bat, we have this being shared. This is by Jimmy Rushton, who is a Kiev-based foreign policy and security analyst. He says, amongst others, that I've been shown unreleased footage from the SBU confirming 2 A50 AWACS aircraft were struck by drones. Now, we don't have this footage. We haven't seen this footage, so we don't know struck, damaged, destroyed. We have no idea of this. But what we do know is that footage like this will become available. Ukraine has every incentive in the world to release this for, of course, optical victories, symbolic victories, and of course, strategic victories of striking these aircraft. And in my opinion, A50 is far more important than any of the TUs. There is no replacement really in the cycle for it, although heavy, large, slow AWACS are becoming slowly obsolete in favour of more stealthy or drone or pods on aircraft, but these are still heavily used, and Russia had, I should say, around 6 operational. So with everything with aircraft just weighed out. I know everyone's taking this as destroyed, but we can't analyse the footage yet. Remember, the same media telling us that 41 aircraft were destroyed the other day, the same media told us that Russia had no missiles left in March 2022. So I think asking just to hold off and wait to confirm it for ourselves is completely reasonable, although waiting for evidence is now considered to be Kremlin talking point, which is fucking ridiculous. Now, let's talk about the Kerch Strait Bridge. Now, where are we talking? Of course, we have Ukraine here. We can see where the border is. We have Russia over here, and this is where Crimea connects with mainland, then Russia. You can see the bridge through here. Long time, symbolic of then the country being connected. Now, let's talk about what we saw. This is the footage released by the Ukrainian SBU. On the bottom of one of these pylons, we see a large underwater explosion. You can see the pylons running back here, how many there are, and this is then on the first one. And of course, these first ones have then further barricade buffers on these, predicting some level of attack like this. You, me, most people on the internet are not structural engineers, so the actual damage of this, well, we don't know. We do know that traffic has reopened here. Now, this is what Defence of Ukraine has said, that this operation lasts several months, and there seems to be a lot of operations that are being carried out over months. So several months on this operation, 18 months on the operation to target the Russian strategic aircraft. That there are a lot of these going. But remember that if this is 18 months, several months, this really does need to make an impact too, because this is tying up a lot of resources and a lot of risk for a long time So it needs to show real result too. Now, they say that agents, they planted explosives that equivalent of 1.1 tons of TNT, so equivalent, it's not that there. And they say the bridge is in critical condition. Now, what we do know is that the bridge has been reopened to traffic. We don't know anything further than that. A few hours after this, there was drones both in the air and on the ground and missile warnings towards Crimea as well, but it doesn't seem like any other attacks had any significant impact, at least from the footage that I've seen. Now, is it that it was divers planting explosives here, or was it, as some are reporting, underwater UAVs, the underwater UAV that we saw being tested a while back? From this footage here, this is almost 2 years ago that we saw this. Could it be that? Because what we do know is the Magura drone, all these types of Beck drones, they were being reported as domestically made, domestically produced, all of this. And then it started coming out. I was reporting it for a while, and then it started coming out, so people started believing it, that there's a lot of enabling behind the scenes of this. And there was some people saying, hey, a lot of this was developed for a counter of China on Taiwan. And could we see a lot of testing of these subsurface vehicles like these in Ukraine, getting real-world battle experience on these systems for then further attacks that may be down there? So I wouldn't be surprised if it was something subsurface as well. But the claim of spies or agents doing it, of course, has more risk then for the FSB to look into many other different factors and groups that may be there. Again, that is just speculation, but we will see. So let's talk about the bridge. Now, a year ago, we reported that a Ukrainian article was quoting Ukrainian intelligence services suggesting that the Kirch bridge has minimal military use anymore because other routes have been made. And this is why that time in war is the enemy, because things that are very relevant become eventually irrelevant. We see this with a lot of late deliveries of weapon systems or counter systems. And throughout the years, the bridge has lost a lot of its strategic value. We have then the new rail lines coming from Taganrog, Rostov-on-Don, all the way down into Crimea and meeting other areas in the front line. And of course, we've had then beefed up southern fortifications that have reduced the threat of these logistic routes as well. So the bridge has definitely reduced in its strategic value, but the symbolic value of this has always been absolutely massive. And the longer that goes on, the symbolic value is increasing. But remember, the symbolic value of this bridge, I think as a conservative estimate, is 10 times the strategic value. I'm surprised the bridge hasn't been brought down yet, just as a show of force. When it does, and I'm sure that it may at some point, again, with what we always talk about in effect, we wait to see battlefield effect, and I think it would be still relatively minimal given the other routes. Now, we did see, of course, things like this. We saw this is a Ukrainian drone boat, a Beck here, being targeted by a Russian Lancet. As we know, Russia has lost some aircraft and some fighter aircraft, some helicopters and some fighter aircraft trying to take out these boats. Of course, very, very costly. The best way to do it is something like this, a drone hitting a drone. We see this Lancet then taking that one out. And I'm sure, as we spoke about some of this technology that may have been pushed towards Taiwan, moving into here to get some experience on it, I absolutely think that China will be looking over going, what is the best counters for systems like these? Now, let's have a look at the maps. Here's Ukraine in the center of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22. The purple since 2014. The red check that you'll see is ground Russia has made over the past 24 hours. Now, what I showed you yesterday, and what I think was one of my better videos, was the momentum month to month and an explanation of why attritional warfare is not constant or linear. And what I wanted to do is add in Suryak's numbers, because in my opinion, he's probably the most accurate mapper. And we have this from a Mr. Hey, it's Hayden on Reddit. We see then the gross of these numbers, but of course you have to subtract this, but it gives us Suryak's advancement and some of the big days, in almost 64 kilometer squares, and Ukraine's gross here of being about 32. So what I've done, and we're going to work this backwards through 2024 as well, is we've added this into our chart. So we have Deep State Wall Mapper, who then we see are Ukrainian, very pro-Ukrainian sources, and then two neutral sources of Syriac and AMK map. Maybe we'll add a Russian source like Divgen or Rybar if we can get those numbers. But what we do see is this gives us a good idea of where the number is sitting. We had AMK at 714, we've got Syriac at 634-ish, and Deep State at 440. So this gives us a sort of a nice upper middle ground here, and gives us that it has been a very large increase, taking from any numbers from April to May. It's been a significant sharp climb. June is the month that I'll be looking for. It's been an outlier in previous years, so wait out on that. But we could see a steep rise in these as well. So let's then actually have a look at the maps and see where things are changing. The first area we need to come up into is, of course, Sunumi, and we do see large advancements in here on the Deep State map. In my opinion, these are further on. This is showing 4.1 kilometers. I do believe this is further to the south than this is showing, but this is definitely escalating in here, and Russia is pushing very hard. So let's talk about this. This is then the Syriac maps. Now, he shows a couple of things. On the southern edge towards then Pasivkia in here, that there has been no ground made, but a lot of then fighting between the Ukrainian and Russian forces. We see to the west of Konstantinivka, he claims that the Russians have made it out into a small village, whatever, I can't even read it on this, but taking up just this area of the border. And then he also claims in Kirch that the Ukrainian forces have crossed back into from Oleksandrivka. This is adjacent to Guevo. So from then this area just in here have crossed back into the Kirch Oblast, as we can see just by this. But let's talk a little bit more about Sumy, and of course Sumy city. And let me bring up this pre-prepared slide. And what we can see from the very outskirts of where Deep State map is showing to the center of Sumy city is around 20 kilometers or 12 miles. Now, what we have seen is that the Russian delegation, they have been making, of course, requests for the 4 oblasts. But what we are also seeing is the Russian forces are using a lot of resources and are making significant gains in the Sumy Oblast as well. Do I think then this will ever be added to their request? No, I don't think it is. But what this does do is it does add further complexity to the front line, because I don't think there's any plans to assault the city, but it is a very good location because of where the Russian border is and the safety behind that to deliver things like FABs, as well as it ties up many Ukrainian forces in here, because this is a hub city, ties them up away from then the south and the east, far away, and then Russia may have an easier time down there. This is exactly the Ukrainian Kursk operation in a Uno reverse card. Now, overnight, we did see Tornado S rockets attack Sumy city, and as we see this get closer and closer, expect more and more drones targeting the city itself. As we do know, there are a number of drones that can target around this range, so wait out on Sumy. Now, let's come then to the west of here, and then we have Tyantyno. Now, what we can see on this map today is this grey zone has appeared from the Ukrainian border in the direction of Tyantyno, and this is further confirmed by Syriac maps. He's showing this as Ukrainian-controlled territory and more in the direction of Zaraya out in here as well. But I think we can confirm that there is some further Ukrainian advancement into Russian territory on then this front line. Now, let's push our way down, and then we see around Toretsk, just to the northeast of Toretsk, we can see in the direction of Delivkia, this map has shown Russian advancement of approximately, let's go here to here, about 2.7 kilometers. What we do know is we did see Russian forces in Delivkia itself, but this map is catching up on those areas. And I want to show you a little bit of geolocated footage on the Pokrovsk eastern sector. So we have Yambalivki, we have Zoroya, areas you may be familiar with. And then we see this geolocation here, which is just where my cursor is at the moment, some 3 kilometers exactly behind then the line of control here. We do see a Russian assault. Now, again, the success or failure of this assault at this point in time, we can't say. But what we do know is there's definitely fighting in those areas. But it is very interesting to see these Russian vehicles then dropping off, then the Russian forces, and then retreating back, withdrawing back to safety under massive amounts of smoke screens as well. Smoke screens in battle, I completely understand. In drone warfare, there's a bit of me that thinks, does this just make the vehicle stand out significantly more? Again, I don't know, but you can see these vehicles going back. We may get an update on the success of those if further footage then arises. So let's talk a little bit about FABs. And what we do know is FABs are incredibly deadly on the front line, and as I say, is, in my opinion, the system Ukraine need to build counters for. I know a lot of resources go into other operations. I'd be pouring resources into a way to try and counter these. And I'm going to show you why these are so deadly. And I often say I put these under the banner of artillery because they are commonly used like this. Now, we have a small settlement, this Myrny down here, just west of Malanivka, really just behind the line. So it's between where these two tree lines are. So let's just go here to here. So it's only 2 kilometers behind the line. We have footage like this, and this shows us as well the accuracy of some of these glide munitions. You can see some have already hit, and then you can see these striking directly on top of houses on then the front line, which we would presume are then locations of troops. So you can see the accuracy of these, also the lethality of that level of explosion. I think many people don't appreciate how deadly hundreds of kilograms of explosive actually is, not only from the explosion itself, but from overpressure and also psychologically as well. But then we need to push back up into the north, because this is where things get a little bit interesting today, talking about Kharkiv. Now, this is what we see, these articles coming out from Ukrainian media today. The FAB UMP-KD. Russia has begun testing a new glider module in the Kharkiv region, allowing aerial bombs to fly further. That extended range up to 95 kilometers. And where this is coming from is the head of Kharkiv Regional Prosecutor's Office, this Spartak Borozenko. He says on May 31st at 10:30 a.m., 4 launches of guided aviation bombs with an extended range gliding and correction module, the long-range UMPK, were carried out from the settlement of Tomarivkia in the Belgorod region of the Russian Federation. This was the first use of the specified module in Kharkiv region. Also, in May of this year, according to operational information, they had already used similar bombs in the Sunumi region. So the first time in Kharkiv. Let me show you just a little bit of measurements on this of where he says. And this is Tomarovka, this is Kharkiv here, and we're talking about 76 kilometers away. Of course, these numbers are very, very rough, but well within range of Kharkiv city itself. Let's continue. If last year the average distance from the launch site to the impact site was 60 to 80 kilometres, now we can already know that they are using specified guided aerial bombs at a distance of 95 kilometres. We understand that they are currently testing them. Perhaps the distance will even increase. And if we open the map, we can see from the launch site in the Tomarivka district to any place in Kharkiv can be hit by the specified guided aerial bombs. From the analysis of the wreckage, it was discovered during inspections of the scene by prosecutors and investigators, it was established that other heavier fastening systems are used, enlarged wings are used, and the latest developments are also used to control said wings, which makes it possible to cover a distance of 95 kilometres. So these have extended out to 95 Ks, which is then incredibly deadly. And we're going to run just a couple of very, very rough numbers here. So from Tomarivka to the border, we're talking 35 kilometres, but we're going to be less conservative in these numbers for the use case of typical FABs, but I can also extend these out to that 95 kilometres in some of this maths if you'd like as well. And this is what I plugged into pretty roughly into ChatGPT. This is my prompt to it as well, but these are the assumptions pulled out of my prompt. Let's say the Su-34s, they're releasing the bombs 20 kilometres behind the border. The Patriot air defence systems is no closer than 15 kilometres to the border. I think that's pretty safe estimations there. So between the two, we have 45 kilometres. He claims in this bit here that the launches are carried from 9,000 metres high at 700 to 800 kilometres per hour. Okay, so we've taken these figures released from this prosecutor's figures that he has given. But once these are released, I'm also assuming the plane can make a turn and then go full afterburner, which is around 1,300 kilometers, which is realistic for a Su-34. The Patriot engagement, we know, is up to 70 to 100 kilometers against aircraft, but the best effectiveness is inside 60. But this is also assuming perfect conditions in weather too. And the time in kill zone is defined as time within 70 kilometers of the Patriot engagement range. So, of course, at one point, these are 45 Ks. It needs to make a turn. How long have you actually got to engage that aircraft? And you could extrapolate this into fighter aircraft to take down things like Su-34s as well. And this gives us an idea of why we're not seeing any of these go down. So, Su-34 is 45 kilometers from the Patriot system when releasing munitions. This is well inside the maximum aircraft engagement range of around 70 kilometers. So then we get a timing breakdown. Of course, this has to make a big turn. So at drop 750 kilometers, bang in the middle of this. A conservative combat turn takes 20 to 30 seconds, depending on the aggressiveness. We'll assume 25 seconds for a steep bank, so bang in the middle. This is where the aircraft is decelerated and most vulnerable. It's also having its largest mass towards the radars as well as it is side on. It covers about 5 to 6 kilometers in 25 seconds at 208 meters per second. So the post-turn escape, once that turn is made, we'll assume a full afterburner exit, 1,300 kilometers at 361 meters per second. Of course, you then are presenting the most amount of heat of the aircraft, but you're also trying to get away the fastest. You don't have the weight of the munitions on any more as well to get out of there. To cover this 25 kilometers takes 69 seconds. So the total time in the kill zone here is around 94 seconds, a minute and a half. Now, this can go up and down depending on a lot, of course. So if you round it at 700 kilometers, 100 seconds, at 800 kilometers, it's closer to 85. So we have about a minute and a half of time where those systems can hit. But again, this is assuming that that aircraft is much closer than we have seen these dropping from 35 kilometers away from Tomarivkia, and also assuming that that Patriot is 15 Ks from the border, which is very, very close. Likely they are much further. So the Su-34 is in a Patriot threat envelope for 85 to 100 seconds after munition release. 25 seconds of that time, it's turning, and that's when it will be the most vulnerable. And this gives us an idea of just how deadly these systems are and the inability to target them at this point in time. But also from that footage I showed you, it has both a medium strategic system effect as far as it can strike in Sumy City, Kharkiv City, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, but also then a tactical effect right on the front line, like I showed you, being used basically just as incredibly heavy artillery of a 500 to 3,000 kilogram artillery system only a couple of kilometers from the front line. And these are an incredibly deadly system. And I think a lot more resources need to be put into targeting direct systems that are having tactical and strategic effect rather than a lot into symbolic or only long-range strategic effect as well. Again, you need a healthy balance of tactics and strategy. It can't be one or the other outweighted. So it gives us a good idea of why we're not seeing Su-34s go down. And those are, I think, probably best case scenario numbers that I have plugged in. Anyway, we can move that around as we see. We could do out to 95 kilometers and see if it's at max range, how inside of the envelope is it at all? Does it ever enter the envelope in the turn? Again, we will see. Legends, I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I will speak to you tomorrow. I'll get you the results as soon as I have them. Thank you. Bye-bye.